here is the example student essay. All right, this is in MLA format. I'll have another screencast on that. So, near the final version, not quite turn-in ready. This is what we're looking at. We do these because has a lot of your actual problems, right? Rather than a perfect one that's, it's not fixable or something like that. These just have tended to work better in the past. But remember, this is not a perfect essay. The point is to understand what's wrong with it. All right. So while I have this open, what we also want to do is look at the essay points breakdown. And so in class, for the people not in the hybrid classes, what we're working on right now is just would go through and circle. You could write in points here too. This is what shows up on your actual essay. What do you think about just that's most important is the thesis statement, so that comes first. The second most important thing, topic ideas, your sequence of ideas. So all of the topic sentences working together to advance the thesis, how do you think that works? And then paragraph development. And remember, this is the meat of this first essay. These shouldn't be too awful difficult for your thesis statement and sequence of ideas, but we need to keep on the train tracks with the paragraph development and not switch topics, right? Not switch ideas, don't switch anything, just stay on what you declared in your topic sentence. And the introduction and conclusion we're going to get to in just a second here. So this takes most of a class period to do because students will score it, all that sort of stuff. For this particular, for the hybrid class, y'all are going to need to know what to do, what direction we're going before you can produce your drafts in a sort of a meaningful way. So I've highlighted here in blue, subject, idea, and this is, I don't know, I guess it's pink or something, magenta, I think is what I selected for that. Notice before we get into it, you can line everything up by color. Since, remember we're writing essays, thesis statement, got to have a thesis statement for your essay. Subject idea, right? Those are the two parts. It's always going to be the two parts. Subject idea, subject idea, subject idea. So the subjects are in blue. Well, all of your subjects need to go back to the blue, right? What suffering does. Naming paragraphs, so that's good. Naming specific paragraphs goes back, lines up with the actual essay. So we would expect, 5 through 8, so that seems to work. 9 through 12, and there are just 3 body paragraphs in this one. But we are at 1,000 words, all right? So paragraphs 1 through 4. So if we just look at the thesis statement, in What Suffering Does, David Brooks argues that suffering affects a person's life almost as much as happiness. And what we would do in the physical classes right now is take time, people would score it, talk about it with their buddy and all that sort of stuff. But I'll just tell you right now, this is a legitimate thesis. It's not really what what Brooks is arguing though, and it's also not what the student herself here. Remember, Jane Doe and John Doe are just unrecognized. You don't know who they are. When cops find a body, they call it Jane Doe or John Doe. It's not particularly what Jane Doe does, right? She doesn't really, in this essay, support this thesis. So she means something else to start out with, but on the face of it, if this in fact could be supported a little bit better, this could be a legitimate thesis statement. It's just the meat of it, the substance of this essay is going to make that one really tough to do. So we'd want to go back and look at that. All right. So probably better to take it off the points for the thesis statement to start out with. Right. So 15 maybe. If you wanted to go against that and say, well, wait a minute, she could support this, then you could start it out as 20 with a thesis statement. But then you'd have to dock points later a little bit more for your sequence of ideas and your paragraph development. So let's just hang on the magenta here. Suffering affects a person's life almost as much as happiness. All right, so, and now I'm going to run through the whole thing. It's not wrong to type this. It's just, it's extra, it's tedious. People don't like to do it. So you can just listen to it orally and do this with all of your topic sentences. I'm just going to restate the thesis statement, in the topic idea. In paragraphs 1 through 4, the first way Brooks goes about arguing that suffering affects a person's life almost as much as happiness is that he talks about how the main focus of people's lives is to find happiness. I'm not sure what talks about means, right? She means something more specific here, and I like to do this essay for an example essay because just about all of you do this, right? And so we could take some time. We're going to read through the paragraph. What does she mean, right? Talks about. It's not talks about. It's something more specific than that. Remember, your topic sentences have got to be very specific, right? Let's skip to the next one. So notice we didn't even read the first paragraph. You don't have to score the first 40 points of the paper. All I have to do is just look at the thesis statement and topic ideas. The way it's listed like this is on purpose, of course. Remember, your thesis statement's always the most important thing. Second most important thing, your topic ideas. For most of the papers that you all are going to write over the next couple of years, you should be able to just sketch them out in terms of your thesis statement and topic ideas on the back of a note card before you enter evidence and all that sort of stuff. All right, 5 through 8, so that stayed on the train tracks, the paragraphs part of it. Brooks talks about where suffering takes a person. The talks about is bad, but also this is also vague, where suffering takes a person. She means something a lot more specific in this paragraph than where suffering takes a person. So what she would want to do is revise this topic idea to be more specific. 9 through 12, that's on the train tracks. What people feel when recovering from suffering and how they make a difference. Also, she means something a lot more specific than that. These are not good ideas in the topic ideas. They're not very specific topic ideas. So we need to just right off the bat, you can see we need a general revision here. So I would tend to do something, if we went back to the essay points distribution, and we're going to see essay points breakdown. I would not go 20 to start out with. Maybe a generous 15 or something to start out with. Topic sentences. Does that work? No, you can't read that. We'll just stick with yellow. All right, so topic sentences. These are easily fixed topic sentences. But just because I don't have an actual pen here, we're just going to go ahead and write that in here. At least take a step back, right? A step or one notch down for 14. All right. Paragraph development. Does the evidence, right, support just the topic idea? Do the paragraphs stay on topic? So let's check a couple of these. In paragraphs 1 through 4 talks about the main focus of people's lives to find happiness. All right. When thinking about what is to come in the future, most people think of all the happy and exciting things that are to come. Brooks says, in one 3-month period last year, more than 1,000 books were released on Amazon on that subject. Okay, so that seems to be okay so far. It is apparent that the main focus is on how to become happy. However, and the semicolon should go after happy here, and the comma goes after however. I left all the common errors in it. All right. However, perhaps the main focus should be on suffering. When thinking about the past, most people remember the hard times along with the good times. Most people recall the ordeals that seem most significant, and this can be proven true to anyone about their past. So she's citing here at the end of the sentence. Someone is more likely to recall a hard time in their childhood that taught them to always be strong rather than winning a stuffed bear at a carnival. Of course, not all suffering will be damaging. All right, and if you're kind of sensing that something is off, this is why keeping on the train tracks is important. Brooks argues, main focus of people's lives is to find happiness, but then she doesn't stay on to find her main focus of people's lives to find happiness. If she said this in the idea, her whole paragraph has got to be on this. So this is what I mean by going off the train tracks. However, semicolon, however, comma, perhaps the focus should be on suffering. When thinking about the past, most people remember the hard times along with the good times. All right, that's not lining up with the idea in the topic sentence, right? She has shifted to something else. Someone is more likely to call a hard time in their childhood that taught them to always be strong rather than winning a stuffed bear at a carnival. Same thing. Of course, not all suffering will be damaging, and some quickly be dismissed. Some accounts are clearly life-changing. Just how Brooks uses Franklin Roosevelt, getting polio and coming back more empathetic before is an example. We'd need a citation there too, but I'm going to tell you, this example with the president that's not in paragraphs 1 through 4. She's talking about material that is here. It's off the train tracks, both in terms of the idea, and it's not contained in paragraphs 1 through 4. I forget what paragraph it is, but it's later on in the essay. All right, so that's not good. She is both with the subject and idea gone outside what she's supposed to do. All right, so remember what we want to think about how these topic ideas working. Little steps, set up things, play chess. This is what we want to do. You don't want to get out all your points in your first paragraph and then, from your perspective, not have anything to say for the rest of the essay. But really what it is you're not supporting your ideas as you go along. So, and remember, we don't care in this class. We want to think like lawyers. I don't care if you actually believe what you're arguing here. And you all typically say things such as, well, I came up with some really good BS for that paper. Well, remember, we think a lot more like lawyers, right? So part of this, it's a practice, right? The practice of rhetoric is what you're doing here. You don't have to believe in the position. You just need to be able to support it. Right? So if that's the way you want to think of it, that's fine. I don't care if you come up with some good BS. Just have it. It's BS that you support, or that you support. All right. Next, in paragraphs 5 through 8, Brooks talks about where suffering takes a person. Now let's read through here because this paragraph's actually a lot tighter. She just has a bad topic idea. Suffering takes a person to the opposite feeling that happiness causes. Well, seemed to be obvious, right? So I'm not sure what that's doing. But Brooks refers to the theologian Paul Tillich, who once said, people endure suffering, are taken beneath the routines of life, and find that they are not who they believe themselves to be. When someone is suffering through a devastating occurrence in life, he or she will come to the realization that they may be stronger or better at handling the situation than he or she ever imagined. Brooks uses a metaphor that suffering is like smashing through what they thought was the bottom floor of their personality. So maybe it's something about suffering transforms people, or the specific way that it can transform people would really start helping to fix this paragraph. Suffering causes a person to realize their limitations. Good, right? So that's interpretation. She's advancing a topic that we could probably pencil in at this point. It shows them what they can and cannot handle. When people go down into their zones, they are forced to understand that they cannot foresee what will happen and cannot force them to not feel what they are suffering. You don't need a belt there. But when things start to turn around and the grieving subdues, it is still unknown where the wave of comfort came from. Brooks uses another former president as an example. He states that Lincoln suffered through the pain of conducting a civil war and came out with that second inaugural. This just shows, or this is an illustrative of, this is an example that even when Lincoln was facing a tremendously stressful and deep time of deep suffering, he was able to come out of it stronger and with better ideas. Okay, so this paragraph has potential. She's not going too off the train tracks in the discussion. Maybe some little unnecessary stuff, some awkward wording at times. But this probably would, if you could come up with something for a good specific topic, just the idea part of it here, this is promising. And I like to see this sort of problem early. Not that I ever like to see problems, but this is a problem that once she sees what's going on, remember she's at the same place y'all, or was at the same place most of you are at right now. Once you start to see how to craft a paragraph, well, then they all get fixed after that. And unless you're just tired when you're writing, you lose concentration or something like that. All right, the last thing Brooks talks about in paragraphs 9 through 12 is what people feel in recovering from suffering and how they make a difference. Again, vague. What people feel, that's way too vague. And how they make a difference, also vague. Brooks makes a good point when saying they can't determine the course of their pain, but they can't responding to it. All right, I don't know about the good and bad. We just need to keep on the topic. This is relevant in not only when talking about suffering, but something that is true in any part of life. A person cannot see what will happen once they drop into these zones, but they can decide to have a forceful response. Once a person has suffered, he or she wants to have a positive response to it. All right. Well, she is commenting a lot on it. It's unclear how it works with the topic idea. By placing the hard experiences in a moral context and trying to redeem something bad by turning it into something sacred, try not to say then goes on to do, right? Commentary about how it fits. Lose a child, they go on to foundations rather than just grieving of the lost child forever. Okay, so this is the interpretation for this evidence. Recovering from suffering causes a person to be different than they were prior to the cause of suffering. So that should tie right in very explicitly with the topic idea, the revised topic idea. It causes them to become more passionate about their hobbies. Something about you can live a fuller or a deeper life in suffering, I think is what she's trying to say that Brooks is saying. Right? So really there's some good stuff in the body paragraphs. It's just the problems are compounding, and that's one thing we want to everyone to see here. The problems are compounding in this. So I don't know, 30, I'll just go here because man, that is really close to, if this and this weren't so bad, I think she's going to have, and this is a former student, so I'll just tell you, she ended up having a real good paper, but right now this is not a real good paper. I'll just knock it here because it's the second spot too. Introduction generates genuine interest for the essay and is developed. Could be better generate interest. This is what we want to see in an introduction, or this is what I want to see in an introduction. Everybody's really like this. You're not doing anything outside the norm for anything that we're going to do in this class. Remember, everything's about the thesis statement, so you need to generate something that's interesting. Can you come up with an anecdote? Grab an interesting statistic, something from the dictionary, present the subject or idea, make that interesting, the idea of it, and then transition, to the thesis statement, to this. So you're on the general theme of happiness in our readings, right? Let's see what she does. Whenever I think back to my childhood, okay, she's going to have an anecdote. Whenever I think back to my childhood, I'll remember times of happiness. I may think of walking into, so boom, she's hitting the theme in the first sentence. I may think of walking into Disney World and being in complete awe as I saw Cinderella's castle, or I may think of the time I scored my very first goal in soccer. When I daydream about the future, I like to imagine myself graduating. Okay, things that make me happy. Most people like to think of times of joy and happiness when they think of the past or daydreaming about the future. Switch. Notice the word however again. However, when I think about how I have grown from the past, I may think of difficult times in life. Thinking of times of suffering may not seem like something someone would want to reminisce on, but those times of hardship are what make the person stronger. Okay, so this was her attempted transition, right? So attempt at catching the reader's attention and the attempt at transition. The particular problem for this transition, she is transitioning to suffering, but it's the subject. How did she get to this essay? So maybe just a qualifying sentence or something, even saying something such as, we had to read it in composition class, or maybe in your own studies, or somehow you came along this essay. It doesn't have to be true, right? We're not going to check all that stuff. Just has to appear to be relevant to your interest. And also, this is okay. This is not bad for an introduction, but it's not all that particularly interesting. Right? So things that you can do to help make your introductions more interesting are, there she was, Snow White, hair, black as wet coal, right? So I don't know, description. Something that makes it stand out a little bit, right? And so if you are applying to your four-year schools for, you'll do this early if you, for next year, some of you, it's, good description, details that really stick out in people's minds, include sensory data if you can't, sights, sounds, touches, tastes, smells, great specificity. So not that grove of evergreens over there at the edge of the field. Remember that one cedar that lightning hit in 2015 and gave it the scar down the mid-level of its trunk, right? That the barbed wire right? Goes across, and the tree has grown around the barbed wire there, under old man so and so's field. Right? So that's the sort of thing that will stick. You still don't need to talk about happiness, but that's what'll make it stick. And then so and not that you need to work on this, but it's the details that make things convincing. And if you've ever known a very good liar, you will notice that the very good liars know to incorporate details. They're lying about the details too, right? When I did this, I remember that it was 7:24, right, when this happened, right? It gives the appearance of believability, but also makes it stick in your head. Okay, conclusion. Now we can evaluate what is good, bad, both. What's what you really think about the essay, because you're not doing it in through here. You shouldn't be. You're just talking about what the author says, in her case, what Brooke says. So what does she really think about Brooks? Brooks' argument that suffering shapes a person's life just as much as happiness is very valid. Okay, so now let's see why it's valid. She didn't really say good or bad. She's valid. He uses very good points and examples to justify his argument. That's vague. I believe that he has a very convincing case, and he uses resources and examples to back up his case very well. That's just a statement of opinion. Whenever I think about my past and times suffering and how those times have shaped my life, I believe it because I can feel it, but still she's very vague. Even though I do recall happy memories, I also recall hard times. Being able to look back and think about those tough times where I've struggled and suffered have allowed me to appreciate things in life and value the happy moments. All right. I think I'm feeling his essay to be true. That doesn't mean anything, right? So in this one section, when he uses examples, he uses very crisp examples. For instance, and then talk about why an example is especially good, or his sequence of ideas, how he gets to his how he advances his ideas. This appeals to you, or it's probably easier at this stage to be a little negative. You don't have to be positive about it. His argument really wasn't very good. It was very good because it lacks blank, right? So if he would have included an example that said something to the point of boom, specific thing that you mean, right? That would have made it a lot better. If he'd have had these, better statistic or any real statistics, right? Somebody that's actually crunch some numbers. So when he says blank, there's no numbers to whatever it is that you think, right? But also greater specificity. Remember, to evaluate means to judge. And in the conclusion, it is okay to do this, right? Per this style of essay. Now, we don't want to do that in the body. We don't want to get off on too much of that. You just need to tell me what you think Brooks is trying to say and support that. And I think this will be enough for you to get through the essay, your draft, which will be due Thursday night. Remember to bring a copy so that we can exchange papers, peer at it, if you all have any questions, so on. Really the big thing now for you all is to go through and check your outline that you should have already turned in, to do the colors if you wanted to color code them, or as I was doing in class, just underline the subject one time, make sure they all line up. Same thing with your thesis. Avoid the talks about, goes on to say, then went on, that sort of language. Don't do that. All right, I think that will conclude this the screencast.